There's a quiet kind of pain that comes when you're doing everything right, and still nothing moves. You've visualized, affirmed, aligned your thoughts, watched all the signs, tried to feel good, even when you didn't. And yet, what you want feels farther than ever. It's maddening, isn't it? This invisible barrier between your desire and your reality, this tension in your chest, this gripping sensation in your gut, like you're always one breath away from it happening, but it never does. And so you try harder. You tighten your focus, you double down on your rituals, you say, maybe if I just believe more, maybe if I just stay high vibe for a little longer. But deep down you know something's off, because the trying is starting to feel heavy, and the hope is starting to feel like pressure. This is the paradox no one tells you. The more you try to manifest, the more you often push it away, not because desire is wrong, not because you're broken, but because the frequency of trying is not the same as the frequency of having. You don't manifest from effort, you manifest from essence, and effort, when it's laced with anxiety, fear, or control, becomes interference. It muddies the signal, like static on a radio. You're transmitting, but it's not clear. Your body knows. The tension in your shoulders, the way you hold your breath, the clench in your jaw when you check your phone again, hoping for that message. That's not coherence. That's survival. That's your nervous system gripping onto control because it doesn't feel safe to receive. And if your body doesn't feel safe, your signal won't be clean. Your essence can't flow, because manifestation doesn't respond to what you think. It responds to what you embody. And embodiment is subtle. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't beg or plead. It doesn't chant for attention. Embodiment whispers. It knows. It becomes. And in becoming, it doesn't chase. Because when you are it, there's no need to grasp. Imagine a flower trying to bloom faster by pushing its petals open. It would tear itself apart. But when it's nourished, when it feels the sun, the water, the soil, it opens, naturally, effortlessly, not because it forced its way into being, but because the conditions supported its unfolding. You are the same. Your desires aren't meant to be yanked into existence. They're meant to be allowed, received, and yes, guided, but not from force. From frequency, not from trying, from tuning. But tuning requires stillness, listening, letting go of the noise of desperation, letting go of the pressure to perform manifestation perfectly, letting go of the constant inner checklist. Did I feel grateful today? Did I visualize enough? Was my vibration high enough? That checklist is keeping you in the loop of effort, of control, of proving, and you don't need to prove your worth to the universe. You don't need to earn your desires through suffering. This isn't a test, it's a remembering, a softening back into what's always been available to you when you stop grasping and start trusting, because the moment you stop trying to force the frequency is the moment your field begins to clear. You can feel it, can't you? The difference between pretending to trust and actually feeling the exhale of surrender in your bones. The shift from, is it working yet, to, I already am. That shift is everything. That shift is the collapse of time. That shift is the release of resistance. That shift is the opening where magic enters. And it begins, not when you do more, but when you let go of needing to manage the how. The moment you stop asking, what else should I do, and start feeling into, who am I being? That's when the frequency changes. That's when you stop pushing, and that's when it starts arriving. There's a moment, quiet, often missed, where the body speaks louder than the mind. You might be repeating mantras saying, I am abundant, I am loved, but underneath, there's this subtle tension, this quiver in your breath, this squeeze behind your eyes, this invisible grasp that lives beneath the words. That's the real frequency. Not what you say, but what your nervous system says in silence. Because even the most beautiful affirmation becomes static if the body is vibrating fear. Even the most positive thought won't land if your system is bracing for disappointment. And that's the core of it, isn't it? We try so hard because we don't feel safe to not try. We grasp because we don't trust that life will hold us if we let go. And in that grasping, we build an energetic wall between where we are and what we're calling in. Not consciously, not maliciously, but protectively. You see, trying too hard is often a trauma response dressed up in spiritual language. It's the subconscious saying, if I just do more, I'll be safe, I'll be loved, I'll be chosen. But manifestation doesn't speak the language of urgency. It speaks the language of coherence. And coherence doesn't come from hypervigilance. It comes from nervous system regulation, from grounding, from presence, from soft, surrendered embodiment. That's why the energy of, "I need it now" will never create the timeline of "it's already mine," because they're fundamentally different frequencies. Think of it like tuning into a song on the radio. If you're just slightly off, you hear static, interference, bits and pieces, but never the whole song. That's what trying too hard does. It puts you slightly off frequency, and then you wonder why nothing feels clear, why the signs feel confusing, why synchronicities start and stop. It's not because the universe isn't listening, it's because your signal is scrambled by striving. True manifestation is not about intensity, it's about intimacy, with your own energy, with your own essence. It's a relationship, not a transaction, not "I do this, so I get that," but "I remember who I am," and life responds. But remembering is terrifying when you've spent a lifetime surviving, when your nervous system has been wired to believe that rest means danger, that ease means laziness, that surrender means failure. No wonder we try so hard, no wonder we obsess, no wonder we loop in the ache of not enough. We've been conditioned to believe that only effort makes us worthy, that only action makes us safe. But manifestation isn't a reward for your hustle, it's a mirror of your coherence. And coherence is not built in over-efforting, it's built in quiet trust, gentle calibration, subtle shifts in how you breathe, how you move, how you return to your center again and again. And this doesn't mean you stop desiring, or that you give up on your dreams. It means you stop trying to control their arrival. You stop treating the quantum like a vending machine. You start relating to it like a mirror. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are. And you are most magnetic when you are most yourself. Not the performative self, not the high-vibe mask, but the real, raw, regulated self that isn't afraid to feel, that isn't afraid to wait, that isn't afraid to not know. That's the you the quantum responds to. That's the frequency that bends timelines. Because when you stop trying to force a future, and you start trusting your now, you create the conditions where the future folds into the present, where waiting becomes receiving, where pressure dissolves into peace. It's not that what you want is far away. It's that the version of you who already has it isn't in effort. She's in embodiment, he's in coherence. They're in resonance. And that's the secret. Not more trying, more tuning, not more reaching, more remembering, not more doing, more being. That's when the frequency clears. That's when the field aligns. That's when everything starts arriving, gently, naturally, without force. I used to think the more I wanted something, the more I had to push. Like desire alone wasn't enough. Like I had to prove I was ready, earn it with my energy, squeeze it into form. But every time I tried harder, it slipped farther away. It was like chasing a butterfly in a field. The faster I ran, the more it fluttered just beyond my reach. Until one day I stopped. I sat down. I breathed. I gave up the chase, and it landed gently on my shoulder. That was the moment I understood. Manifestation isn't a game of pursuit. It's a dance of presence, of alignment, of soft magnetic pull, not hard mental push. But it's so easy to forget that when the stakes feel high, when you really need the money, when you ache for love, when your body longs for healing, when you're watching others manifest with ease and wondering what you're doing wrong, that's when the effort kicks in. The mental spinning, the emotional tightness, the subconscious gripping, and in that energy, we unknowingly block the very thing we're calling in. Because our frequency isn't "I trust it's coming," it's "I'm afraid it won't." And fear fragments frequency. It sends mixed signals to the field. It confuses the mirror of reality. You see, the quantum responds to clarity, to coherence, to the signal beneath the story. And the signal of trying too hard is often lack, not enoughness, desperation, the feeling of being separate from what you want. And separation creates distortion. It builds an energetic wall between the self and the desire. That's why trying harder often feels like swimming against the current, exhausting, frustrating, and ultimately futile. Because what you're seeking isn't downstream, it's in stillness, in letting the current carry you to it. But to trust the current, you have to feel safe enough to stop paddling. And safety isn't found in more information. It's not in another podcast or book or checklist. It's found in the body, in the breath, in the quiet inner knowing that says, even if it hasn't come yet, I'm still whole, I'm still safe, I'm still enough. That frequency? That's what collapses timelines. That's what magnetizes outcomes. That's what shifts the field instantly. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped resisting it. Because surrender is not giving up, it's giving over. It's placing your trust in the deeper intelligence of life, that's always conspiring in your favor, even when it doesn't move on your timeline. But we're not taught this kind of trust. We're taught control, strategy, hustle. We're taught to manage outcomes instead of embody alignment. And so we live in tension, in effort, in chronic vigilance, wondering why our manifestations feel delayed, distorted, or denied, when really the field is just waiting for us to drop the mask, to drop the effort, to return to the frequency of alreadiness, the feeling of, I am now who I thought I needed to become. That feeling is powerful. It melts resistance. It calls in support. It aligns you with the path that already exists. You just couldn't see it from the frequency of striving. So what happens when you stop trying so hard? You begin to feel, to sense, to receive. You notice signs you were too busy to see. You hear whispers that used to be drowned out by doubt. You soften into synchronicities instead of trying to orchestrate them. You start living from coherence instead of control. And your life, your field, your reality, they shift. Not overnight, but instantly. Because the moment your frequency changes, the moment you become the version of you who no longer needs to grasp, everything responds, everything aligns, everything begins to flow, not with force, but with frequency. Sometimes the most magnetic thing you can do is nothing, not out of apathy, not out of defeat, but out of deep, embodied trust, the kind of trust that hums in your bones, the kind of trust that doesn't flinch in the silence, the kind of trust that says, I don't need to chase because what is mine knows how to find me. And that kind of trust can only grow in the space where effort softens, where you stop trying to manage the mystery, where you stop gripping the outcome like a lifeline and start becoming the version of you who already holds it, without needing to see it yet. But this isn't easy, because the mind wants certainty. The ego wants proof. It wants evidence to validate the inner shift. It says, if I feel peaceful, then show me results. But the quantum doesn't work like that. It's not a vending machine where peace goes in and manifestation pops out. It's a mirror. It reflects not just what you do, but who you are while you're doing it. So when peace becomes a strategy to get the thing, it backfires, because the frequency underneath is still effort, still manipulation, still conditional. And conditional peace isn't coherence, it's performance. True coherence doesn't negotiate. It simply is. It's the quiet knowing of a heart that's no longer bracing, a body that's no longer contracted, a self that's no longer performing worthiness. That kind of embodiment is what moves mountains. Not because it demands, but because it radiates. It doesn't hustle to attract, it simply becomes. And in becoming, it bends the field. You've felt this before, in those moments where you stopped obsessing, and suddenly the message came. The opportunity appeared. The door opened. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped interfering. That's the observer effect at work. Your frequency, your emotional signature, your state of being. It's not passive, it's participatory. The quantum responds to who you are being in every moment. Not just in meditation, not just in the journal, but in the mundane, in the waiting, in the breath between impulses. That's where alignment lives. Not in the flashy ritual, but in the way you answer a text, the way you walk into a room, the way you hold yourself when nothing is certain. Because coherence isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. It's about how often you return to your essence when the old patterns try to pull you back into effort. And they will. The urgency will rise, the doubt will whisper, the fear will flare. You'll feel the old impulse to check, to fix, to force. That's okay. That's not failure. That's feedback. A reminder to return, to exhale, to soften, to recalibrate. You are not being tested. You are being attuned. Every moment you choose presence over panic, trust over tension, alignment over anxiety. You strengthen the signal. You become more clear, more coherent, more resonant. And resonance is irresistible, not to people, not to outcomes, but to reality itself. Because reality doesn't happen to you. It emerges from you, from the frequencies you emit, from the emotional safety you cultivate, from the identity you embody, moment by moment by moment. And when that identity is rooted in enoughness, in grounded openness, in surrendered expectancy, not only do things begin to shift, but you begin to recognize how much was already happening for you all along. How many manifestations were waiting for you to stop trying so hard and just open, just receive, just be the space where they can finally land. And maybe that's the real work, not the effort to manifest, but the courage to stop efforting, to sit in the in-between with an open heart, to feel the ache of desire without making it wrong, to hold the vision without gripping the outcome, to become the frequency of fulfillment before the form arrives. That's not passive. That's power. That's creation at the highest level. Not manipulation, but magnetism. Not pressure, but presence. That's the shift. That's the invitation. That's the frequency that changes everything. You can feel it, can't you? The moment the tension drops. The moment you stop trying to get it right and start remembering who you already are. That sacred exhale. That tiny but powerful shift from effort to essence. From performance to presence. From chasing to becoming. It's subtle but undeniable. And in that moment everything changes. Not because the world suddenly rearranges, but because your signal becomes clean, clear, coherent. And that coherence, that's the currency of creation. That's the true magnetic field. We're taught that to change our lives, we need to change our actions. But in quantum terms, it's not the action itself, it's the vibration behind it. You could take 100 steps from fear and not move an inch, or take 1 step from alignment and watch timelines collapse around you. That's how powerful frequency is. That's how intelligent the field is. It reads your being, not your to-do list. It responds not to the quantity of your effort, but to the quality of your embodiment. Are you being the version of you who lives in lack, or the one who breathes abundance like oxygen, not just in thought, in posture, in pace, in presence? Because coherence doesn't rush, it doesn't panic, it doesn't ask, why is it taking so long? It rests in a knowing that transcends time. It understands that what's aligned can't be lost, that what's meant isn't missing, that what's real will rise when you're aligned enough to meet it. So the work isn't in making it happen, it's in making yourself available to receive it. And availability requires safety, nervous system safety, emotional permission, the inner environment that says, it's okay to let go now, you don't have to hold everything together, you don't have to prove yourself anymore. And in that safety, something unlocks. The mind loosens its grip, the heart softens, the body becomes receptive, and the signal you send into the quantum field becomes unmistakable. I am ready because I already am. That's embodiment. That's not a trick. It's not a shortcut. It's a homecoming to the part of you that's always been whole, always been worthy, always been wired for receiving, not by force but by frequency. And when that part of you is dominant, when it becomes your baseline, your default state, manifestation becomes a side effect, not a struggle. But embodiment is a practice, a remembrance, a return, again and again, not perfection, not spiritual bypass, but truth, felt in the body, lived in the moment. So ask yourself, where am I trying? Where am I grasping? Where am I pushing against the flow? And then, where can I soften? Where can I breathe? Where can I trust more deeply? These questions aren't for the mind to answer. They're for the body to feel, because the body is the bridge between thought and reality, between desire and manifestation, between now and next. And that bridge doesn't form through force, it forms through frequency, through choosing again and again to be the signal you wish to see reflected. That doesn't mean you'll never feel fear. It means fear no longer leads. It no longer runs the show, it becomes a visitor, not a resident. And that shift, from fear-led to frequency-led, is what changes the game. That's what ends the cycle of striving. That's what opens the gates to receiving. That's when the field responds. That's when reality bends. Not because you earned it, but because you finally stopped blocking it, you stopped trying so hard, and you started trusting so fully. That's the moment everything begins to move, quietly, powerfully, invisibly, until suddenly, it's undeniable, and all the effort you thought you needed, it dissolves. Because you realize it was never about doing more. It was always about being more of you. There's a rhythm to receiving, and it doesn't sound like effort. It sounds like space, like silence, like the breath you didn't know you were holding finally releasing into the room. That breath is the signal, that exhale, that softening, that I'm not forcing this anymore. It tells the field you're ready, because the field isn't listening to your words, it's listening to your regulation, your stillness, your trust. And trust, vibrationally, is the ultimate clarity. It says, I already know it's mine, I don't have to fight for it. And that frequency, that's when the future folds into now. But what blocks that rhythm most isn't your doubt, and it's your pressure, the constant background hum of urgency that says, why hasn't it happened yet? that inner countdown clock, that performance anxiety with the universe, that need to see proof before allowing peace. But peace isn't what comes after your manifestation. It's the doorway to it. Not just emotional peace, but vibrational peace. A coherent field, a regulated body, a softened gaze. That's what draws life toward you. Because life responds to resonance, not rationale. To essence, not effort. And when you're trying too hard, it's not just that your energy is tense. It's that your signal is unclear. You're oscillating between trust and fear, between allowing and controlling, between being and performing. That oscillation sends a jumbled message to the field. Bring it to me, but I don't really believe it's safe. So the field reflects that back. Delay, confusion, false starts, and you spiral deeper into doing. You say, I must not be doing enough. But the truth is, you're doing too much. You're overriding your own power with noise, with proving, with effort that isn't aligned. And it's not your fault. You were taught to earn everything, taught that rest is weakness, that ease is suspicious, that if something doesn't cost blood and sweat, it's not valuable. But quantum creation doesn't work that way. It's not a merit system. It's a mirror system. And mirrors don't respond to how hard you try. They reflect who you are when you stop trying, when you relax into your truth, into your enoughness, into your innate magnetic field that was never broken, just buried under layers of pressure. So the question becomes, what if I stop trying? What if I drop the chase? What if I let go of the rituals done from fear, the affirmations said from lack, the meditations performed like tasks instead of sacred moments of tuning in? What if I didn't need to become anything else, but simply let myself be who I already am, fully, deeply, now? That frequency, that's embodiment. And embodiment is the only true signal. It doesn't beg, it doesn't hustle, it doesn't shout, it radiates. And that radiance moves mountains, collapses time, and aligns realities. Not because of what you did, but because of what you became. And that becoming doesn't require more trying. It requires more truth, more breath, more groundedness in your being. It requires emotional safety, the kind that allows you to stop micromanaging the mystery, to stop checking the window every 5 minutes to see if your manifestation has arrived, to start living as if it already has, because that's not delusion. That's coherence. That's frequency alignment. That's the paradox of real power. When you stop needing it to show up to believe, it shows up. When you stop trying so hard to make it happen, it starts happening everywhere, without effort, without force, just pure clean resonance, and that is more than enough. That is the invitation to everything. Maybe the most courageous thing you'll ever do is to stop trying so hard, to stop efforting your way into alignment, to stop chasing miracles and instead become the space where miracles naturally unfold. Because there's a moment, a quiet, sacred moment, when you drop the performance, when the armor falls away, when you stop proving, stop pretending, stop pushing, and in that stillness you meet the version of you that's been waiting beneath the surface all along, the one who doesn't need to manifest to feel worthy, the one who isn't chasing a life but creating one from within. That self, your truest frequency, isn't dramatic. It doesn't plead or strive or bargain with the universe. It simply radiates. It walks through the world like a lighthouse, not because it's searching for ships, but because it knows what it is. That kind of inner knowing can't be faked. It can't be forced. It comes when you stop trying to manipulate your reality and instead tune into the vibration of who you choose to be, no matter what. And when you hold that frequency, not to get something, but because it's who you are, you collapse timelines, you override logic, you shift into coherence with a life that reflects that version of you without delay. But that shift often comes after the breakdown, after the exhaustion of trying, after the frustration of watching your rituals turn into routines, your practices into pressure. That's the sacred edge, the place where the old way stops working, not because you failed, but because you're ready for something deeper, something more honest, more embodied. And that's when you begin to listen differently, not to the noise of the mind, but to the rhythm of your being. You start to feel when your effort becomes interference. You start to sense the difference between inspired action and anxious doing, between allowing and forcing, between flow and fear. And you start to notice how much more life responds when you stop chasing signs and start becoming one, when you stop asking for proof and start being the evidence, when you stop broadcasting from the frequency of I need and begin to live from the essence of I already am. That's when people call you lucky. That's when synchronicities speed up. That's when the very thing you were trying to summon begins to find you, in ways you couldn't plan, through doors you didn't knock on, along paths you couldn't predict. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally let go. And letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in to the wisdom already pulsing through your field, to the intelligence that knows how to bring to you exactly what serves you, without the scramble, without the strain. It means trusting that you don't need to manipulate the quantum to be supported by it. You just need to stop resisting the way it wants to support you, because the only thing ever in the way is your belief that you must earn what's already yours, that you must suffer to receive, that you must struggle to succeed. And in the release of that old programming, you make space. Space for the real, for the natural, for the graceful unfolding of what's been circling you all along. You start to recognize that your job was never to make it happen. Your job was to make it safe to arrive. And that safety doesn't come from control. It comes from coherence, from embodiment, from the deep breath that says, even if nothing changes yet, I am not lacking. I am not late. I am already in the frequency of fulfillment. That's when the field shifts. That's when your signal clears. That's when everything begins to align, quietly, elegantly, without the effort you once thought was required. There comes a point when you stop asking, how do I get there? And begin living from the knowing, I already am. Not because everything has shown up yet, not because all the conditions are perfect, but because something inside you finally settles, finally drops the illusion that effort equals worth, finally releases the compulsion to perform peace in order to earn presence. And in that surrender, that true deep vibrational surrender, life begins to reorganize itself around your coherence, not because you forced it, but because you became a match for the timeline where it's already done. You start noticing how differently the world responds to your softness, how doors open more easily when you stop pounding on them, how people feel safer in your presence when you feel safer in your own body, how opportunities align when you stop looking frantically and start walking slowly. And it's not magic, though it might feel like it. It's physiology, it's vibration, it's coherence at the level of your nervous system, your breath, your field. Because when you regulate your inner world, the outer world reflects that regulation. It becomes safe to receive, safe to expand, safe to allow. And this isn't about passivity. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing from a different state. A state of remembrance, a state of embodiment, a state where action arises not from panic or urgency, but from alignment and clarity, from a deep-rooted knowing that your life isn't waiting to begin. It's happening now, that you don't need to try harder to earn your next level. You simply need to stabilize the signal of already having it, not mentally, energetically, emotionally, subconsciously. And when you do, not once, but consistently, you become the inevitability of your desire. Because the version of you who already has it, she's not hustling, he's not doubting. They're not checking the clock or the inbox or the signs every 5 minutes. They're living, breathing, expressing, showing up as the energy they once tried to chase. That's the embodiment. And embodiment is the bridge, not the bridge to the future, the bridge to now, to the present moment timeline where your desire is no longer a distant possibility, it's a vibrational reality. One you're already living into, breath by breath, choice by choice, without resistance, without force. And the irony is, the less you try, the more you receive. The more you rest in your being, the more becomes available. Not because resting is the strategy, but because it's the return to your center, your clarity, your coherence. And from there, the field can meet you, not as a test, not as a reward, but as a mirror, reflecting back the frequency you've finally allowed yourself to hold. You realize you never had to prove anything. You never had to grip so tightly. You just had to trust the intelligence that beats your heart, the same intelligence that organizes worlds, collapses timelines, aligns destinies. So if you're tired, let go, not out of defeat, but because you've remembered the truth. It was never about effort. It was always about energy, not more doing, more being, not more control, more coherence, not more striving, more surrender. That's the alchemy, that's the shift, that's the frequency that doesn't just change your life. It changes who you are while you're living it. And from there, everything you've been trying to chase begins to find you, quietly, powerfully, effortlessly, because you've finally become the space where it belongs.